Survival games have two main loops: gathering and crafting. You go out into the world, gather some wood, some rocks, and if you're lucky, maybe a gamer girl GF. You bring it all back to the base, give it a tickle at the crafting table, and just like that, you've made a new item. Usually, you know the recipe beforehand, but after a while, you begin to learn all of them by heart, and then slowly, you're not discovering things in game anymore, and crafting begins to feel like a chore. Kind of like how my mom felt about me after I told her I was moving back into the basement. Love you, Mom. But what if crafting wasn't always as simple as knowing what ingredients go into a recipe and then gathering them? What if you could make your own unique weapons, armor, and even towers to protect yourself and your base in a survival game? Would that make progression better or worse? I wanted to know the answer to that too, so began the long, arduous journey into the dark abyss of adding procedural crafting to Elixir Punk. If you're not aware already, Elixir Punk is a survival tower defense game where you gather materials, craft new items, and explore a procedurally generated world during the day and protect your base from increasingly difficult waves of enemies that attack at night. The game is written in Zig and uses Raylib as the graphics library. So a couple months ago, I had the idea of using procedurally generated towers. The idea would be that the players can craft pieces of a tower and then combine them in different ways to create their own unique towers that would benefit their playstyle or strategy they're using. I figured this would do two things for me: create potentially interesting emergent gameplay where the gathering and crafting loop really become a more integral and interesting part of the game, and allow me as the developer to save some time and having to come up with a ton of unique one-off items and towers for progression. The idea of it intrigued me, but at the same time, a more standard feeling of progression, for instance, when you defeat a boss with a 1 in 4,000 chance to drop an item called Giga Chad's Revenge, is exciting in its own right.
Hit the gritty. Oh fuck, my bad.
While these two systems are not mutually exclusive, I do think it would make sense to lean into one more than the other. As for which would be better for the game, I'm not sure, and there's only one way to find out. So here's my idea. Each tower will be constructed of 3 different modular pieces: the base, the column, and the top. I don't actually have real names for these yet, so this is what they're going to be called for now. Each of these pieces will be constructed of different base materials that can be mixed and matched to create towers and defenses for your base. For example, a wooden base might have less HP and accuracy, but will have a higher attack speed than a stone one in the early game. Similarly, a stone column will give more support, so the accuracy would be higher compared to a wooden column. The tops are where the bullets spawn, so in keeping with the themes, a stone top might be stronger and deal more damage, but a wooden one will be faster. And these can be mixed and matched to create a tower that is super strong and slow, fast and weak, or some combination of the two. Depending on which parts are placed where will affect different things in the tower. The same functionality could then be extended to weapons and armor, giving the player many choices on not only what to craft, but also how to combine them in ways that best suit their playstyle and their run. I pitched the idea to my Discord and they thought it was worth a shot, so I got to work. But I soon realized that while the idea is one thing, the implementation is a whole different beast. They put down one tower workshop, and then they put down another one over here. This one won't even open because it's the first one on the list. This one is going to open and close because it's the second one on the list, and as soon as this one gets hit in the loop, it's going to close it. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is just embed the menu directly in our buildable if they have it. Where is it? Set menu, function, set menu struct, and we'll take in our menu, which is it. I don't have a reference to UI here. Okay, first let's see if this just works, or if we crash. It doesn't even open. Great. Okay, I made some changes. Let's see if this works for us. Okay, should be showing. It's still not showing. Oh. Look, I never said I was the smartest guy ever. The crafting recipe requires 16, I got 14. Yeah! Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now we got these slots rendering properly. Now we can work on crafting some actual towers. But I couldn't start working on some actual towers. The menu you just saw me getting into the game had one big flaw. Let's observe what happens when I drag an item into the menu. And this little issue led to one of the biggest reworks I've had to do thus far. You see, the current way the drag system works is that if an item is being dragged, we loop over all of the UI elements on the screen, check if they are overlapping with the mouse, and then set the inventory slot to have that index if the mouse is released over it. Each slot is linked to an index in the inventory, and for the regular inventory hotbar, this works fine. But this menu is not part of the inventory and has no index relating to it. In fact, it's not even considered to be part of the same UI system at all. So when an item gets dragged over it, the mouse doesn't think it's hovering over any UI elements and puts it on the floor. But in my defense, you see that comment there? I knew it was horrible when I wrote it. I left it for future me to fix. And now that I was future me, it was time to pay up. Like, I made this so I could separate it out easily, and then I didn't fucking use it. Yeah, we want to move this here, UI, and then I'll call like crafting UI. If it's possible, I would like to do that. So if show crafting. Okay, now I've got a draw call going on here. Just for now, just to check that this actually works, we'll do this. But yeah, this is going to get reworked, so I'm not really too worried about this. Where was that thing called from? Oh, here. Oh my god. That should finally work. Now for the test to see if these draw, they do not. Oh my god. There we go. And that works the same. Okay, perfect. You guys are not going to believe this, but after about 2 weeks of work, the game now looks exactly the same. Well, at least we can finally move on now. Here's what changed. Menus are now their own struct and have functions to allow for placements of child elements, meaning I can now move entire menus as a single unit. Menus can now be attached to buildable objects. Any item can now be dragged into a newly created menu. Every menu can have its own logic for updating and drawing using function pointers or use the defaults. The entire UI codebase is cleaned up and much more simple. I want to give a big shout out to Daniel, who suggested that I add a 41st inventory slot that is reserved for the player's mouse only. I told him that if I ever refactor the inventory that I would definitely do this, and I'm glad I did. This allowed me to get rid of so much unnecessary logic for crafting new items, moving items around, and flags for whether an item was being dragged or not. So everybody in the comments, please thank Daniel. If you also struggle with poor planning and program design, you may benefit from this video's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is an online platform where you learn by getting your hands dirty and doing interactive lessons designed for programming, math, data analysis, and AI. Whether you're a seasoned game developer or a beginner just getting started, Brilliant has courses designed just for you. The best way to learn is by rolling up your sleeves, locking in, and actively participating in your own education. Brilliant's lessons are designed with a hands-on problem-solving approach that lets you take the driver's seat, a method that is 6 times more effective than watching lectures. Or, devlogs. One of the courses that caught my eye immediately was a course on designing games and application. These lessons are designed to help you think like a programmer. They have lessons that teach you the basics, like how to think about moving objects in a game world, how to use decomposition to break down complex problems, which I'm sure you can guess comes up all the time in game development, and they even have lessons on event-driven programming. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/melondev, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. With the UI system in place, I was finally able to move on to the meat and potatoes, procedural crafting. And honestly, it was a lot simpler than I had anticipated. The solution that I, and definitely not ChatGPT, came up with was using a render texture. What I wanted to do was use a combination of our 3 existing textures for our tower base, column, and top, and create a new texture using all 3 of those. Render textures are already used in the game to draw world space reflections for things like our foliage and our player, but they can also be used in other ways. A lot of people use them for mini-maps and overlays, but the possibilities are really endless. Think of them as separate windows that can be drawn on and overlaid onto your game world. Render textures have the unique property of, as the name would suggest, also being textures. This means that we can draw them in the game, save them to the player's file system, convert them to an image, or whatever else you can do with a regular texture. Now, I know this art is not winning any awards, except for maybe a Razzie, but I went ahead and drew up a wooden base, column, and top. There are 3 slots in the tower workshop. The 3 pieces must be placed in the correct order, or no crafting can be done. Once the pieces are placed in the correct order, you can click on the craft button, and the tower parts will be consumed, and out pops a newly created tower. Like I mentioned previously, the stats are based on the parts you used, and you can edit, say, the range of the tower by adding or removing parts that increase or decrease the range. Each material might have a special property. Say something like an obsidian base might give you the ability to place 2 tower columns and tops, allowing you to double up on your placements. The idea for this comes from the Discord, one of the first to join.
Ada-ada.
Nope.
Getting the towers to be created is one thing, but we also have to get them to be placed into the world. Currently, this is done by the very scuffed building system I went over in my last video. I ran into plenty of issues getting these towers to be drawn onto the screen. See, what I wanted to do was draw the towers from the towers file, keeping all of their data separate. When I created the tower, I placed them into their own list, and this list, of course, was separate from the one used to draw buildables. So when it was placed into the world, the tower from the buildable file was being placed, not the one from the towers file. That's an easy fix, you might say. Just use a pointer from the tower to the buildable and draw it there, and yeah, that's exactly what I did. But the tower also needs a pointer to the buildable object to see where it's placed, to do things like check if an enemy is in range or not. And because these two structs need pointers to each other, it made me think that there had to be an easier way to go about structuring things. It was at this point that I made the decision to restructure the code to be more ECS-like, but not today. I was determined to get this tower system working, so instead of fixing it now, I swept it under the rug for future me to clean up later. I'm sure he will thank me. Each tower has a list of enemies that keeps track of the enemies that are currently in range of it. We then sort this list by a few different sorting algorithms and get either the closest or furthest enemy from the tower or the enemy with the most or least HP. You'll be able to pick which enemy to attack based on a menu that the tower has that's not in the game yet. After adding them to the list, we then do a few checks to see if the game will break accessing a null value, and if we don't, then we're able to attack the enemy. Attacking is interesting because the way I want it to work in the game is that each tower can be loaded up with its own different kind of ammo. For instance, you could load it with stone, or later on some kind of ammo that slows or poisons enemies, or anything else really. Point being that the tower will use whatever ammo it has loaded to initialize a projectile of the same kind. The projectile then spawns with those stats and travels to the enemy. I've decided for now that it will just track the enemy as it moves, but this may change later on. With the basic tower logic implemented, we're nearly out of the skeleton phase of building out the game, and we can soon move on to generating more actual content. It's been a long road so far, but I'm really excited to get the game to a place where it can finally be play tested. That brings me to the question I have for you guys. What ideas do you have for material progression in the game? I'd like to avoid the standard wood to stone to iron route if possible and lean into more of a magical sense of progression. The game will have a heavy focus on using elixirs to craft things, so anything related to alchemy or magic or things like that would be nice. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe, join the Discord to share your ideas with me and to read daily updates. And once again, thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. I'll see you next time.